Good evening, everyone. I'm Jordan French, the Regressive Progressive, and this is the TYT Community Hour. Unfortunately, we've had some technical difficulties. I will be filling in for our normal stalwart host, Jeff Waldorf. That means we won't have the bells and whistles that you've grown accustomed to here on the TYT Community, although Jeff will be able to go back and put all that in post whenever he puts the clips up. But we thank you so much for bearing with us tonight. As we kind of put the show together as best we can. We've got some great stories for you. Joining me tonight, we've got Jules Frazier, and Haven is with us as well. Jules, it's nice to finally get a chance to meet you. You know, I haven't done a show together. I appreciate you you coming in to help out. And Haven, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on tonight.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome.
Glad to join you guys.
And nice to meet both of you, actually. I've not met Haven or you, Jordan, so this is very nice. This is a very nice sitting.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you guys hadn't done a show together.
Yeah, no, we haven't, so awesome. It works out well.
Yeah. Should be interesting.
Well, let's go ahead and get started with our first story tonight. Let me scroll up here. So apparently, there may or may not have been a chance that the newest host of Meet the Press could have been Jon Stewart. According to the New Yorker's Daily Intelligencer blog, Jon Stewart may have been considered to anchor Sunday talk show Meet the Press. Several sources have leaked that that Deborah Turnus, president of NBC News, reached out to Stewart for the gig. We may never know for sure if this is just hearsay or not. However, we've had several sources have confirmed this, but they're all anonymous, and neither NBC nor Stewart have confirmed or denied the rumors. So Haven, Jon Stewart has proven time and time again that he's more than just a one-liner. He's more than just a joke. He's shown us that he's got the chops to put on a decent interview. Would you have watched Meet the Press with Jon Stewart?
No, I wouldn't, because it's Meet the Press. And I feel like it would... I love The Daily Show because it's the one bastion of truth, and it's the one place that would actually reach a lot of the stoners that watch Comedy Central in between South Park and whatever other crazy Key and Peele show that's going on. So I think I personally wouldn't watch it. I love The Daily Show. I love that he puts other people on the map, and I don't think that he would be able to continue to do that with Meet the Press. I think our future John Olivers and Stephen Colbert's would probably not happen if he's not there to make that happen.
So you don't think he would have overcome the format? You think the format would have overcome him? Is that kind of what I'm getting from you?
Yeah, with Meet the Press, yes. I think that they probably would have pulled what they did to Cenk and fired him eventually. Because I know one thing that politicians don't like is being held to the fire. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen Jon Stewart's infamous crossfire with Tucker Carlson, but he's kind of a very good craftsman when it comes to making people set themselves up and make themselves look stupid. And I guarantee you they would not want that to happen on Meet the Press. I would be scared that they would try to contain him in some way, form, or fashion.
Okay. What about you, Jules? Who wins in this fantasy scenario? Does Jon Stewart overcome the format, or does he get bogged down by the machine?
I don't think it's a matter of him overcoming the format so much as folks watching it. I don't think that his audience is one that is geared for that time frame. It's definitely not a situation that he would do good in, I don't think. He's too witty and does too many jabs to do well in that format, and he wouldn't last long. I cannot even believe that they would have suggested that he be part of that program, because it wouldn't work. I mean, I don't even see in what dimension this would work in, because he's so much not the stiff suit kind, and that's what they're really looking for, I think, more in that situation. Someone that's not going to buck the system, and he bucks the system.
Yeah, I think that's a fair critique. Obviously, Sunday, middle of the day or early day, end of the day, really any time, on one of the big network shows on Sunday, it's a lot harder to get away with what is really what Jon Stewart's really succeeded at, than it is at midnight on Comedy Central. Then also, I think, not that everybody on these news stations isn't just a paid news actor, but we have to remember as well, like, a lot of what we like about Jon Stewart isn't necessarily Jon Stewart, it's the writing staff at The Daily Show. And so, we have to assume he'd lose some of that staff. And as good as he is on some of those interviews, that's also only, a third of the show or whatever. The rest of the show is a monologue that was written by somebody else. And, that format is obviously not going to carry over, at least not 100%, to something like Meet the Press. So, yeah, I don't know that it's the best call for Meet the Press or for Jon Stewart. Any closing thoughts for anybody before we move up?
I would say in a dream world, it would be perfect for him to be on the press. Like, he would be the perfect person because he asks the right questions and he's not so far removed from the thoughts of an average day person that, he would be quick and right on his feet. But I think that what he does for the information age and for the millennials that aren't really, that are very disillusioned, we get a little bit more truth and a way better balance of information to us just on Comedy Central, because apparently nobody takes them that seriously.
For sure. All right, moving on to our next story. We've got life, liberty, and the pursuit of high-speed wireless internet access. Martin O'Malley, the Democratic governor of Maryland, declared this week that Wi-Fi is a human right. This declaration came in a CNN profile on the differences in baby boomers and younger generations, specifically the different ways the respective generations measure success. I quote, baby boomers and older were often told that if we specialize in terms of our skills, we will be more secure and prosperous. That the definition of making it was living out in the suburbs as far away as possible with the biggest lawn possible, O'Malley said. Younger people are choosing to live in cities, O'Malley continued. They realize that connections to each other are making us better, that Wi-Fi is a human right, that proximity is important to entrepreneurship, access to capital and talent and diversity. There's an opportunity there for us as a nation to embrace that new perspective. Now, O'Malley's been making headlines across the country as he stumps for Democratic mayoral and gubernatorial candidates in several states. Not only that, he's even stumped for some state Senate races in states across the country. Full disclosure / bragging, because we think it's kind of awesome. Governor O'Malley recently stumped for friend of the show Tyler Pearson in his run against Arkansas State Senate District 35 incumbent Jason Raper. So, Jules, and now we've got the little plug in there for a friend of the show. What do you think? Is this a human right? Is broadband wireless internet a human access a human right, or is this just a well-calculated headline grab for someone with presidential aspirations for 2016?
I think it's a little bit of both, actually. With the part of the internet is the fact that we have such a wonderful wealth of information, and I think knowledge should be free. It should be free. Knowledge is a human right, and this is our access to knowledge. This is the sphere that we live on now. It's not just the big blue earth. It's the inner tubes, So, yeah, I think it, in a way, it is partially a human right. And I think Google kind of agrees with that, with some of the work that they've done in getting net-ready phones out to people in poor countries so that they can access and that they're also getting their services out to these third world countries so that people can learn and they can educate themselves. And the more educated we are, the better world we're going to have. The more people we have working on things like cancer or space or exploration or whatever it may be, the better we are. And this is one thing that brings it to us.
Well, and let's not be naive. I mean, that may be what, one of the driving factors in what Google's doing. But let's keep it real. Google makes money based on how many people are on the internet. Traffic is what is their revenue stream. That's why their Google Fiber, prototypes that they've been running out in Kansas City and I think Austin, it's basically free because they don't really care about getting people to pay for the infrastructure because they rake in millions and millions and billions and billions off ad revenue. So the more people they can get offline or online, the better their revenue is. That's not to say what they're doing is necessarily a bad thing, but I think they're probably driven by profit more than they are any nurturing ideology to see change in the world. What about you, Haven?
I would say this is, first of all, we need to be very realistic and honest with the fact that this is such a first world human right now. As far as other poorer countries, having internet is probably, at the very least, second to water, but that's just me. Maybe I'm crazy. But as far as within a developed nation, it is a very important thing to have, especially in the U.S. and places like the U.K. because, in these countries, we rarely have instances where households don't have at least more than one computer. And the way things are shifting in this country and others is that we're going into our tertiary revolution, our tech revolution, and everything is being very, very dependent on having access to the internet. I don't think people really understand how important it is to, have your Facebook updated and be connected on Twitter because a lot of jobs are looking at how well interconnected you are and using that as a factor to even hire you in the first place. So I think here in America and places like the UK for right now, yes, having that access is very, very important. It's becoming increasingly important to the point where it damn near is a human right because it might dictate the level of livelihood you're able to obtain.
Yeah, that's there's some solid insight there. I guess it really all depends on what do you mean by is it a human right? Are we talking everyone has a right to legally access the internet? I don't think anybody would argue with that. I mean if you're going to let's say the internet came along during Jim Crow and black people couldn't get on it, I think that would clearly be a human rights abuse or a human rights violation, I guess you could say. But the idea that everybody should just have the internet, I don't know, maybe this is privileged white American male speaking, but that just seems borderline ridiculous to me. To Haven's point, I mean, there's people that don't have access to water, and we're going to equate the internet with that. Now, at the same time, I get that just because there are problems in the world doesn't mean you don't want to make other things better. I mean, I'm not saying that, but yeah, just the idea that.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Having access to knowledge is increasingly important. It's very, very important. But as far as as a human right for Americans, it is. And no one loves knowledge more than me. I love learning things. I wish one of the problems that I think we have as Americans is that we don't have a thirst for learning. But when it comes to having access to the internet, it's not like we are providing infrastructures where we can help people understand how to navigate through the internet. And I think that's probably a little bit more important. There are a lot of people who don't know the proper etiquette or they don't know to not put personal information on it. Those kind of things, if we were to make this a human right and if it is that serious, we would also need to bump up the education and the importance of navigating through the internet, learning proper resources to use, learning the proper sites to go through, what is hearsay, what is really an article through a fourth and fifth source, things like that. So it's it's important, but if it's really that important, then we should be providing a lot more information and education on it in the first place.
I agree with you, Haven, in that sense, but I also think that if we expanded it, if we made this, if we could give access to this wonderful gift that we have to the entire world, maybe they could have water if they had resources.
Oh no, we lost Jules as she was about to make a pretty salient point, I think. Well, while we're waiting on her to join us again, I'll chime in and kind of build on what you and I both said. Like again, I think there's an analogous kind of line to draw there on the information point. It's just again I point to like Jim Crow and to libraries, which I guess are really what the closest thing we've had to the internet for all of human existence until recently. And again, if you're saying black folks have to go to their own library and it's this little crappy library with no books, and white folks get to go to a good library, then yeah, I'm totally with you. Like if that's what you mean by saying it's a human right, like everybody should have access to the same internet and with no legal barriers, I'm 100% there. But at the same time, if I want to read a book, the library doesn't it's not a human rights violation if the entire state-run library doesn't pack up and come to my house whenever I jolly well please. Like if that's what we're getting at, then yeah, there's no way I'm gonna get behind this. Jim, go ahead and pick up there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got cut out. No, I'm not saying that necessarily. What I'm saying is that to have access to this knowledge, to be able to get all of this knowledge in one place, people in third world countries, if we provided the infrastructure like Haven is talking about, they could look at new ways of going about, say, getting water, or new ways of growing crops, ways of bettering their lives. And so in a way that is supporting, and yeah, what you said earlier about, yeah, Google's in this for making money, yeah, that's true. But the amount of benefit that people, extremely poor people, could get from this is just dramatic. I mean, there are so many things. I mean, school kids today literally cannot go to school without having some form of internet or a computer in their house, hardly, because so much of the curriculum is web-based. And
that's very true. I do want to point out that this particular politician is not talking about third world countries getting this access.
I'm not supporting the politician at all.
I'm just saying, I really just want to be realistic. When he says it's a human right, he doesn't mean that it's for the third world. I completely agree with you that letting certain countries and these underdeveloped countries have access to knowledge would be an immense help to them and their personal development. Whether or not we give a fuck that they develop, that's a completely different story. We're probably purposely keeping them kind of as ignorant as possible so that we can extract the metals that we need to continue our technology boom. But when it comes to Americans, I think it is important, but it's not like Americans don't have the access. For the little time that the government was running in a way where nobody was hating it, it did have libraries that have free access to Wi-Fi, so there are options. We should expand those options because not everybody has the ability to get to a Wi-Fi connection. A lot of people don't even have, there's some people who don't have the ability to have a laptop, despite the fact that there's this huge boom where households have like 7 laptops, 7 different types of electronics in their home where they can access knowledge. But
no, that's very true.
Let's not kid ourselves. The more access to the internet means the more people watching porn. That's really just that's what that's going.
No, what you're saying, Haven, is exactly right. My home health aide comes in every day. I have her here 4 hours a day, and I literally have fought tooth and nail to try to get her a computer. And going through different community resources, I absolutely could not find anyone in our community, and we're in a fairly large area, We're like the second largest city in Indiana, which isn't saying much, but there were absolutely no community resources that I could find, and I'm good at finding community resources to help this lady get a computer. She has 3 kids, 3 school-age kids, 2 in middle school, 1 just starting high school. And this, to me, is an absolute necessity for them to be able to have access to a computer and have access to the internet. And yeah, granted, you can go to libraries, you can do this, you can do that, but that's not always possible, especially in poor communities. You don't have the transportation, the library is too far, just you don't have the time. You have to work when you get home from school. You have to do your homework late, so that means you're stuck with nothing, and you can't do a lot of the stuff that these schools expect you to do without having access to a computer and the internet. Yes, it should be something that is basically ours here in the United States. There's no reason, absolutely no fucking reason, that poor families should be without a computer and the internet. There is no reason. There is no reason they should be without food. There is no reason for a lot of these issues, but we're not getting our kids educated because of a lot of reasons, and one of the reasons is they don't have the resources to keep up in school because they can't afford them.
Well, there's some solid points. I do kind of want to, I don't know if push back is the term or build upon is the term, but we need to wrap the segment up, so I'll pull the host card and close off with the last word here. Well, whether or not you think this is a success of the free market and our tendency to let profit drive the greater good in America, or whether you think this is an indictment of that, let's keep it real. We probably will have universal access, probably more readily available and more rapidly than any other thing that we've ever considered a human right, precisely because this is a money-making venture. And it's something that you don't need to have money to pay for the people who make money from it to make money, because they make money off of ad revenue and clicks and traffic and everything else. So even you want to draw a parallel to the story out of Detroit, with the water thing. Those people don't have water because they don't have the money to pay to the water company, to the utility company. Google doesn't care how much money you have. They make money based on what you click on. So poor people become, revenue factories in the system. And for that reason, we will probably see universal internet access and have it treated like a human right, because it's profitable and anybody can turn a profit, or anybody can become a profit, I should say. But that also plays into to Jules's point, and this is where, and Haven brought this up as well, where I might kind of be pushing back. There's a lot of people pushing back against some of the education reform movement and pointing out, like, hey, a lot of these people calling for reform are saying that we do it through the internet and through computers, and they're people who are invested in technology companies, and they're selling contracts for their own companies to the schools they're trying to reform. So maybe that's that's something you have to factor in as well. Moving on, and maybe that's another story for another day. But we do need to move on to our next story, which we will title whenever Jeff gets a graphic somewhere around here in the clip. Bombs up, approval ratings down. According to 2 recent polls, Americans are fairly certain of 2 things. 1, they want to bomb Iraq and Syria, and 2, they're not crazy about the man ordering the bombings. A Washington Post ABC News poll places American support of the bombings at 71%, and that's up from only 54% just 3 weeks ago. Meanwhile, only 43% of Americans say Mr. Obama is a strong leader, which is the lowest he's ever been on this figure since taking office. Now, in the interest of fairness, we should also note this same poll placed approval rating of Congress at 15%. So while Obama might lose an election against bombing someone who never attacked us, he could apparently win an election against Congress. So how's that for your 2016 horse race? Haven, you are the military member of the panel. Do you think your commander-in-chief believes this is the right course of action, or is this an attempt to salvage some poll numbers?
I won't speak for him as to whether or not he thinks it's the right course of action. I personally think that there are different avenues we can take would probably have a lasting effect as far as defeating not only ISIS but any other terrorist cell of next month that decides to let their balls drop and come and attack and harass innocent people. But it's funny, first thing I want to point out is the obvious fact that there is definitely false sampling of these polls, because I've never seen an offer to do any of these polls. And if you really look at it, people will be like, oh, well, you know, everybody hates Congress because it's at 15%, but why is everybody voting all the people that they hate so much right back into office? It's like, because the people who are on the polls are not the same people that are going to go vote, and vice versa. So it's like, yes, not a lot of people like him, not a lot of people care for his actions, but Americans are pretty apathetic and they're pretty fucking slow. So ISIS has been cutting people's heads off left and right for months now. Before it was, you know, a couple of white male Western reporters. Saudi Arabia cuts people's head off for shits and giggles. Nobody says anything about that. So it's like, now that it's a little bit flashy and it's a little bit weird and it's hitting people that look like our cousin or our next door neighbor, it's now we want to do something. Now we want to jump. And I think certain powers that be are really trying to placate into our knee-jerk reaction to fight first, instead of taking a minute and assessing what's really going on and how we can really just end these type of attacks and these type of groups in the first place.
Fair enough, fair enough. What about you, Jules?
No, I agree a lot with what Heaven says. It is sickening to me that we are just now looking at this as an issue since these beheadings of the Westerners, so to speak. It sickens me what she says, you know, it goes on in Saudi Arabia all the time. And I think we're slow, and we don't get the point. So many of us just simply do not get the point. We hear these sound bites, and that's what we go on. That's what we live our lives on, is these little fucking sound bites, and it's the wrong way to do it, because we're not getting the information that we need, and we're not getting it when we need it. So people are walking around absolutely clueless, and they're trying to make judgments against our president and his actions without having any knowledge of what the situation actually is, or what's going on in the rest of the world, or for that matter, even how the rest of the world views us. Because
and I don't think his actions would be any different from any other president. Mitt Romney is going to do the exact same thing. Hillary Clinton's going to do the exact same thing. So it's like,
Agreed.
The nation is tired of Obama doing these things, but it's like, you're not going to get a different guy in 2016. There's going to be another dude in a suit that's going to wear something you don't like and is going to wear the wrong pen, that's going to make the same fucking call, because I guarantee you we're going to have yet another group to fucking face. We're going to have yet another terrorist attack, yet another terrorist something that's going to happen, and they're going to drone it, because we've completely removed any type of human sacrifice, which would probably help us to second guess our actions. We've totally written that off and made it calculated and sterile, what we're doing. So it's like nothing's going to change. So it's really, I think it's us. We as Americans, we're not paying attention. Anything that takes more than 5 minutes and more than a 30-second scroll through Facebook is way too much of a sacrifice to us. And if we really are sick and tired, if we're really tired of all these things happening, we need to get off our lazy asses and start doing something and start changing things and start raising up our voices to be like, no, this is really not, whether it's drones, a soldier, or fucking whatever Blackwater's calling themselves, we don't want you guys coming in there with violence and accidentally murdering a bunch of innocent people and cultivating more of a problem that we're going to have later.
100%. I fully agree with that. Um, it's just a matter of Americans taking charge. And unfortunately, a lot of folks that would like to be able to take charge can't because they don't have the time. They're working their fucking asses off to try to make a living, to try to put food on the table. It's hard to take an hour out of your life to look and see what the news is going on, what's going on with the news, when you're trying to feed a family and you're trying to take care of your kids and go through the homework and you're working 2 jobs and you're not getting any sleep. It's impossible. So I think some of the apathy of Americans is simply because a large portion of us don't have the time to sit down. And unfortunately, it's those of us who don't have the time, who aren't making the money, but are the ones that need to step up. When the proles revolt, the government will be overturned, so to speak. But will the proles ever be able to rise? Going back to Orwell.
Hey guys, thanks so much, Jules.
Sorry.
I want to throw a little plug in here. Obviously tonight there's not a chat on the YouTube channel. I'm sorry, like I say, we had 30 minutes to prepare. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties last minute, and we weren't able to get everything set up. However, TYT Talk, friend of the show, has graciously opened up his website, tyttalklive.blogspot.com, and you can join the chat there. And we will be doing a Q&A tonight if you guys are able to. I think Haven has to jet out here before too long, but we'll do what we can. So anyway, yeah, we'll continue. Jules, I don't know that the problem is apathy. I totally get what you're saying, and like I've got a family, I've got kids, I've got a full-time job. I'm in the office right now, but I think the problem isn't apathy as much as it is people having opinions that should only come with putting in the work to get to those opinions. It's not that people don't care. It's that they care very much about what we should do, but what they're apathetic about is researching, and forming those opinions. They're definitely not apathetic about their opinions. And to what Haven said, yeah, this is the simple one. Like that's, if you can't put it in 140 characters or less, bomb ISIS, then, we don't want to do it. We don't want to talk about, some kind of big region-wide plan, maybe my whole concept of setting a hard and fast perimeter and implementing a Marshall-style plan that actually transforms the region. Like that's super complicated and incredibly difficult to do, and we can barely pass a farm bill in the United States right now. Like it's pathetic. Anyway, yeah, great points, guys. If anybody wants to get in with one word real quick, we can. Otherwise, we'll move on to our next story.
Just real quick, I'm not saying that so much the apathy is that I don't think Americans, the people who really need to be paying attention, aren't able to because they don't have the time. They don't have the resources. That's, so yeah, there is some apathy, but there's also a lot of just utter exhaustion.
Absolutely. All right, moving on, we go to one more poll. Not quite as a resounding result, but kind of a similar problem, maybe not to lead my guest as I report the story here, present the story. But apparently, no-fly zones are no longer a staple of Middle East war zones. It seems that some of the American public would like to see that implemented, at least on a small scale here in the States. What should America do about the ever-worsening Ebola outbreak? According to an NBC News survey, almost 6 out of 10 Americans think the first step, at least, is to cut off all flights from most of West Africa into the United States. Now, of course, the background for this is almost 4,000 people in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone have died from Ebola since March, and twice that many cases of the disease have been reported. Just a few days ago, the CDC and U.S. Customs and Border Protection started a major plan that goes into effect Saturday for more stringent screenings of passengers from these countries at 5 American airports, and that's New York's JFK International, Newark Liberty International, Dulles International Airport outside D.C., O'Hare in Chicago, and Hartsfield-Jackson International in Atlanta. The reason being these 5 airports see 94% of the arrivals into the United States from the countries hardest hit by Ebola. But apparently that's not enough for the American public right now, and they want more. President Obama echoed this same dire sentiment around the crisis Wednesday during a conference call with state and local officials. And I quote, "We don't have a lot of margin for error. If we don't follow protocols and procedures that are put in place, then we're putting folks in our communities at risk." Now, Jules, yesterday, Eric Duncan, America's first person to develop Ebola after arriving in the States at least, passed away. Are Americans overreacting to that news, or is this a legitimate response to a horrible crisis?
No, Americans are definitely overreacting. Ebola is so hard. I mean, it's not the easiest thing to catch. I'm on immunosuppressives. I have because I have autoimmune disease, I have an immune system of like a cancer patient. So I have no immune system, basically. I'm not worried about fucking out Ebola. I'm worried about the common cold because I can catch the common cold. I'm not going to come into contact with bodily fluids of someone that has Ebola on a daily basis. I mean, even out in the community, you're not, you're going to have, walk up to someone and shake their hand and it's going to be bloody and you're going to have open sores on your hand and that's how you're going to catch it? I mean, I'd like to know how people think they're going to catch it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's kind of, Ebola is kind of the inverse of that. Now, obviously, for someone with a compromised immune system, things like, influenza or even the common cold are terrifying because they spread so rapidly, but to the general public, they're not a huge threat. Ebola, on the other hand, very difficult to spread, but, horrible prognosis for people who are unfortunate enough to get it. So, even, with that kind of, with that information there, with that kind of in mind, do we owe it, out of respect for what this can do to people and how horrible it is to people to get it? Do we owe them this kind of drastic action, or is this going to do more harm than it does good?
It's definitely going to do more harm if the one nation with the most resources to aid West Africa in this crisis shuts down its borders because it's scared. It gives off an incentive for other progressed nations to do the same, which only exacerbates the problem. One thing and I'm trying my hardest to not get angry because I've been getting immensely pissed off about this Ebola thing, is that we have the enterovirus that's been attacking children. Hundreds of children are infected with this. We've already had deaths, and it's spreading. And nobody seems to give two shits about this. And yet one person, comes over here and has Ebola, and it's like, holy shit, Fred, even us in Montana, we're at risk. It's like, calm down, for one. And it's like, if you're really scared about getting sick with anything, I mean, hell, you're more likely to get malaria in this country than you are to get Ebola. And it's like, what bothers me is that a lot of people did not care. Millions, or not millions, but hundreds of people have been dying in West Africa, left and right, suffering one of the scariest situations that they've ever suffered, and nobody cared because it's over there. Oh, it's a bunch of little black people that are just dying. That's what they do. Isn't that what they have when I'm watching that 30 cents a day commercial in the first place? It's like, we don't care unless it happens to us, and we get to be the drama queen. And it's like, that's bullshit, because our actions are going to affect them. One of the reasons why Ebola is spreading as drastically as it is because we refused to address the situation at the opportune time. We let it spread. We let people continue to get sick. We didn't give out the proper amount of aid, and people died because of it. But lo and behold, because Duncan came over here, and he was here for 2 weeks, and maybe he got in contact with like 7 people, Now it's like, oh, Ebola, we need to do something about that. We need to find a cure for Ebola. It's like, do you not care about that African kid that died? I mean, there are people who are really suffering through that, and to be so selfish as to shut down our borders and close down flights because of the presumed idea of an epidemic happening over here is totally disrespectful to life and totally disrespectful to all those other people who are suffering that are really going through it, who really know what an Ebola epidemic looks like.
Exactly, Haven. I mean, you are so spot on. What pisses me off is that people in America, they absolutely do not see Africa. And, I mean, it's the whole continent. They don't see Africa. It's something that is not even on the flyer, and it should be, because there are so many things going on that continent that we need to be aware of. And this Ebola thing is just one of the many. And for thousands of people who have died from this, and it's a horrible fucking death. I mean, it is a horrible fucking death. For them to have died and us to have been so nonchalant about the whole issue is just fucking bullshit. I agree 100%. It pisses me off, too. And it pisses me off that we're so egocentric that we just ignore this whole populace. I mean, we ignore a whole populace of South America, too, for the most part, unless they're coming across our fucking borders. Then we start getting pissed, which is bullshit. You know, it's just, people are people. We need to start treating people like they should be treated instead of being such assholes about it. We are the bullies of the world, and we could give a shit less unless you're the right color or you're the right wealth.
Well, I'm definitely not going to try to follow that. I'm not quite as, I guess, up in arms as you guys are over it. Maybe perhaps I take a small consolation, and although we may have bungled the humanitarian response to this, at least we didn't cause this one, which is more than we can say about ISIS and some of the other horrible humanitarian disasters.
This time! It wasn't the smallpox blankets! Woo! America!
Well, hey, we're number one at not causing Ebola, so there's that. Moving on to something a little more lighthearted. Let's get into to workers' rights, huh? On Wednesday, SCOTUS heard arguments in a case between, is it the SCOTUS or just SCOTUS? How do you use that term?
I would say SCOTUS.
Just SCOTUS? Okay.
Yeah. They don't deserve a capital T-H-E.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll go with the Supreme Court. How about that?
Yes.
On Wednesday, the Supreme Court heard arguments in a case between Amazon and the workers at one of its warehouses in Las Vegas, Nevada, who allege they've lost as much as 25 minutes of paid time every day during a security screening at the end of the day. Now, we should note that that's my phrasing. I don't know that that's necessarily the legal phrasing. And the reason I make that distinction is because the whole debate is over whether or not that is indeed paid time they're losing. Many retailers do these types of end-of-shift screenings. They're meant to keep theft down. Of course, you know, whenever you work in a warehouse delivery business model like what Amazon is and delivers great prices, shrinkage and theft are going to be two things you really have to control for. You know, and so this is, like I say, a very commonplace practice in the industry. There's been as many as 13 class action lawsuits against Amazon and others in the industry involving more than 400,000 plaintiffs and potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, at the center of this particular case is a 1947 law, which is known as the Portal to Portal Act, which states that companies aren't required to pay for either preliminary or post-preliminary activities. That's which is to say, that's why they don't owe you pay for walking back and forth, you know, from your car every morning in the parking lot. That's not considered part of the job. Sorry, it's not considered essential to do the job, so they don't owe you money for it. Now, the court has offered interpretations of the law and of this law in previous instances. Most importantly is the 1956 Steiner versus Mitchell case, which they ruled that the law required pay only for tasks that are, as I said earlier, integral and indispensable, integral and indispensable part of the principal activities for which covered workmen are employed. So meaning not only does it have to be an integral part of, the workplace, but even maybe specifically, what your job is, what you were hired to do. So while many, with that in mind, may be slow to consider, being checked for stolen property work, others would note and push back and say, well, Amazon requires this every day, and the process wouldn't take so long if Amazon would hire more screeners and invest in the tools and infrastructure needed to expand and quicken the process. So, Haven, do you think, is this possibly as circumstantial of a matter as that? That is to say, if Amazon made this process take less time, it'd be fine if they weren't paying employees, or is that kind of is there too much contingency there? Does there need to be a one-size-fits-all ruling around this? Either it's paid work or it ain't, period. What do you think?
Well, I think they were saying in the article that it takes upwards of 25 minutes to go through these security checks. So it's not like it's not the same time that you're walking from your car to your door and going through, let's say, like a metal detector. So because it takes that long, and because it's not necessarily for anything for the protection of the workers, from what I've gathered, Amazon is doing this to ensure that their products aren't stolen. I do consider that integral and indispensable. So if you're taking up 25 minutes of my time that I could be doing something else with, and it's not even for me, then yes, I want to get paid for that. But I find it lately a lot of worker laws are becoming things that can be on the table. And along with that, there are a couple articles about, the work week and if we should extend it, if we should open it up so that the work week or overtime pay is more inclusive to more people. And again, the Supreme Court, certain individuals, I'm pretty sure everybody knows who is kind of fighting back against that. So I think this is just a little bit of a baby step towards some other things. The unions are gone. They're busted. So everything that a company would want to do to use to cut costs, make sure that they can advance their profits as much as possible from their workers is all open, belly out, ready to be gutted. So I personally wouldn't want the Supreme Court to say that doesn't count and that the 25 minutes that is being wasted by the employees shouldn't be paid, because to me it's kind of like wage theft, and also it's opening a floodgate to other things that could be way worse.
So you're afraid, if I'm understanding you right, maybe then they win this case and they turn on you, say, yeah, it doesn't matter how long it takes, it's not part of the job, it's part of, it's just cost of doing business for the worker in this case. And then so maybe that opens the door in the future, like, hey, bathroom breaks, you're stopping work, so you got to clock out for that 2 or 3 minutes every single time. Is that kind of where you're going?
Oh yes, the slippery slope. I mean, once you get, this is like inching it. They're kind of throwing jabs to see what is tolerated, what kind of bullshit people are willing to eat. And there's a lot of conservative individuals who are like, yeah, they hear, security check, and they think, at best it's like 5 minutes. You shouldn't get paid for 5 minutes. A lot of what I've been hearing on the right has kind of like put under the rug the fact that this is a fucking half-hour process for people to go through. If it's I don't think if anybody hears that you have to go through half hour's worth of security searches, you're going to want to get paid for that. And what exactly are you searching for, and where are you searching? Or it takes 30 minutes for you to find something or not find something.
Well, the problem is there's so many workers and the line is so long. And so that's where Amazon is saying on why this shouldn't be, is because if you make this paid work, then you incentivize being in the back of the line. And so you're going to have people constantly like trying to reverse cut each other and get out of the line and try to squeeze out a little extra pay, for not doing work. So, Haven, just to, again, kind of back to my original question then. So do we need a blanket ruling, or if it takes 5 minutes, is it okay? Is there a time limit on it? Kind of where do you play the line?
To be reasonable, there should be a time limit. There should be a time frame. But to me personally, the second I don't know about you, but the second I walk through my job's door, I want to get paid. Period. Like, I don't care. Like, my car is the only time I shouldn't get paid. But I don't want to walk through these doors. I'm walking through these doors because I have bills to pay. And I want to get paid for that. I'm sorry. So, like, the second I'm in there, clocked in, I want to get paid. But that's just me, and I'm kind of selfish about that. But to be fair, go ahead, yeah, make a ruling where it's flexible enough where it's like, okay, if it's taking an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, you should be compensating your workers. And if it's not, I mean, they could very well just hire more screeners if it's really that much of a big problem. If it's causing them so much, be the job creators that you say you are, and hire more security guards to go through everybody so the lines won't be that long.
Okay. Jules, go ahead and jump
yeah,
in.
I definitely agree. If you're standing in line waiting to be checked out by security before you walk out the fucking door, come on, people, pay the workers. Amazon is renowned for being horrible with their warehouse employees anyway. Absolutely renowned for being just the biggest dickheads in the world with their warehouse employees, and this is just another example. And this will snowball and snowball until it's like you said, Jordan, bathroom breaks. Oh, got to clock out for bathroom breaks, or we're watching the time. And there have been instances that I have read where businesses are checking people how long they go to the bathroom and how many bathroom breaks they take during the day. I know one case was they were talking about the smart ID tags that could define your point in the building and where you were at in the building for how long and whatnot, and how much actual work you're doing, who you've talked to throughout the day. It's just another one of those Big Brother things. This is just, it's fucking ridiculous that they can't pay workers for 25 minutes. In a way, they're incentivizing people to leave early to get into line to get out of there faster. So they need to, the courts need to look at this and say, for once, let's rule for the fucking employees instead of goddamn employers. I'm sorry. It's one of those things that gets under my skin. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's keep it real. I'm glad that Sean hasn't been here in every other segment, but we could use him right now because he could tell us whether or not the whole bathroom break thing has been explicitly ruled on. It probably has. I feel like, I get where you're coming from, Haven, and if any Supreme Court has shown that, previous precedent can be overturned, it's this one. But I feel like maybe the slippery slope is not quite as slippery from past rulings, but again, this is where Sean would actually have something good to say, and I don't have that depth.
I actually worked a job where you did have to clock out for your lunch break, and you did have to clock out if you wanted to go to the bathroom. It was allowed because I was considered an independent contractor for a telecommunication company. So it's not like these things aren't on the table. When I say a slippery slope, what you see is that a lot of what companies are trying to do is expand those type of rulings to not just independent contractors, but full-time employees. Or they're trying to shrink in who's included for overtime pay or stuff like that. So it's like, once they start getting, you see it. Once you start seeing them getting comfortable with, all we got to do is just say jobs and take this away from workers. Right now, we have a visceral effect where it's like, you say anything about taking anything away from workers, people freak out. But slowly but surely, if you put things in the news where it's like, oh, that's not that bad, or they took that hit, you're going to see them get a little bit more strength, slowly but surely, to start putting to the test a lot of provisions that are put in to protect workers.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. And I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, this is something that they've got to be paid for because, like I say, this is a policy that Amazon has implemented, and the reason it takes so long is because Amazon implemented a policy without putting the staff and the infrastructure in place to make it, an expedient process. You've got 200,000 people. Obviously, I'm speaking in hyperbole here for the sake of an easy argument. You got 200,000 people that work at one, building they're going to spend a lot of time in traffic. That's just the way logistics work. That's not a policy keeping people there. This is something that doesn't necessarily have to exist. It exists so Amazon can keep their prices low. And so at the end of the day, I've got to say, yeah, Amazon, you got to pay one way or the other. Either you got to pony up the money and make this a quick and expedient process, or if you're going to make your people take all day, then you got to pay them, and that probably means paying them overtime because they're probably putting in 40 hours a week in their regular shift. But sorry. In closing, we've got to move on to the Q&A here. I guess I just kind of want to put out a little bit of a call to whoever's watching the show, like keep stuff like this in mind. That we're kind of the reason that policies like this exist. If you want to be able to go order anything in the world and have it shipped to you in 24 hours at free shipping, workers are who are going to pay that burden. So, shop local, research where you spend your dollar. And, I know money's tight for everybody, but, don't always go for the cheapest deal. Try to, make your vote, vote with every penny you spend. We'll close the regular part of the show there. We did have another story over a playground and a local yard having to be removed. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to put together show notes for that segment, and hopefully they can get to that tomorrow in the Social Justice Hour. I really think that's a pretty good fit for the story anyway. I'm here at the TYT Talk live chat room, and we've had somebody keeping notes for the Q&A. So we'll take a real quick pause here. I'll get a couple questions together, and we'll come back in about 30 seconds. All right, we are back. We've got a few questions submitted here. Feel free to keep them coming there in the TYT chat. Again, that's tyttalklive.blogspot.com. First question, this comes to us from Tom of Some Say Radio fame. Will Americans shit themselves over every little thing thanks to the 24/7 news cycle? I think that's a fairly easy one. Let's let Haven take this one.
I would say yes, but eventually we learn to wipe ourselves rather quickly so that we can figure out something else to shit about. So I think what the 24/7 news apparatus does is it gets us to not want to pause and focus on issues. So it's like we just want to continue being fed. So it's like, oh, okay, like I don't know if you guys remember, but like 3-4 weeks ago, Israel was a big thing, and that was important. And then that just disappeared, and then Ebola pops off, and then ISIS comes about, and then, you know, some Amanda Bynes is going to be in the news for like 15 minutes. So it's like, because of that 24/7 news cycle, and really, if you notice it, they don't say anything for that entire freaking time. It's 24/7, but it's the same news over and over again. So it teaches us to not be patient, it teaches us to not focus, and it teaches us to not really care with any seriousness about important issues.
Absolutely. Yeah, no argument. Like, we're up front here. I think in pretty much every show on TYT Network is up front about that. Like, we're not doing journalism, we're doing commentary. The problem is, you know, with the exception of a very, very few notable, you know, stations or programs that stand out, all the other news outlets are kind of doing the same thing we are, except they're not quite as upfront about what they're doing. We'll move on to the next question. This is going to be a quick one because it's easy. I'll take this one. This is from Heather. How will the winning candidate for the next president be sold to the masses? Well, the answer is just go watch anything you've seen about Hillary Clinton. She's our next president, period. I'm not happy about that, but that's who we get. So if you want to see how the next president will be presented to the masses, just turn on the news and watch the news about Hillary Clinton. Basically, it boils down to Benghazi on the right, and on most left-leaning outlets except for TYT Network, a whole lot of praise about another liberal savior. Quite frankly, I don't think she's going to be any different than the last two presidents we've had. Then moving on to our next question here. This is another one from Tom. If we recognize addiction to drugs as a mental illness, do you think that will lead to decriminalization in our lifetime? Go ahead, Haven. I'll let you take that one.
First, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, we have to give a shit about mental illness in the first place. I think that's the first thing we have to start with. And then when we connect it, we have to, I don't know, bring back a lot of the infrastructure that we used to have when taking care of people with mental illnesses. I think we as Americans, we've had this very long narrative that people who do drugs are bad people, not sick people. I don't know about anybody else, but I went through the DARE program, and there was never a time where they addressed those who were doing drugs as somebody who were ill, had an addiction, could not help themselves. It was always people who do drugs are doing them because they're bad people, they know what they're doing, and they don't care, and you need to, it's no different from a child molester, kind of how they address them. So I think connecting addiction to mental illness means that we have to care about mental illness first. We have to change our narrative on how we see mental illness, because a lot of people think that mental illness is something that is blatant, where, you know, it's that person who's slinging poop on the wall, and that's when you're mentally ill. People don't really understand that it's more nuanced than that. So in order for us to do that, we would have to care about a whole bunch of things that we do not care about right now.
Yeah, no, that is excellent. It's hard to argue with that. Jules, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I did. A lot of what Hagen said is exactly right. We have to start caring about mental illness. Mental illness in our society is treated as so taboo, and until we take the taboo off of it and actually start treating people as human beings again, we're really not going to get anywhere. And yes, mental illness should be treated, or drug addiction should be treated as a mental illness. It has the same types of chemical responses as any other type of mental illness does. It's a reward system in the brain. And so chemically, yes, it is a mental illness, so therefore should be treated as one. So that's all I'm going to say from a biological standpoint.
Okay. Yeah, obviously our drug policy is just a categorical failure across the board. There's no doubt about that. But let's keep it real. So is our mental health policy. Ever since we deinstitutionalized a few decades ago, we basically just, well-meaning, shifted that burden from a broken mental institution system, and we just put all those people in prison. And that's basically what we do with drug offenders now as well. So yeah, I mean, we're failing on two fronts there, and that's why this particular issue looks so egregious, is because we got two different manifestations of just total failure on the part of the American people and American policy. Next question. I'll answer this one because it'll be quick. Actually, I'm going to answer two here. How about this? Another one from Tom. Jordan, when am I getting you on my show? Haven's coming on Sunday. Julie's a regular caller now. Man, Tom, I really want to come on. I promise I do. Problem is, I work a full-time job, and then I've got two kids, and I'm gonna keep it real with you, man. It's deer season. And not only that, but there's a little antlerless modern gun season coming in. So for the next 5 days, I'm going to fall off the face of the planet. But I don't know, maybe deer season wraps up in February. Modern gun wraps up around Christmas time. So maybe sometime after Christmas I can join. We shut down here at the office for like 2 weeks around Christmas. So maybe I'll be able to join, more than once then. But your show's in the daytime. Sunday would be the only day that I could really do it, and Sunday's NASCAR day, bro. Sorry, man. I'm not going to miss the race. I'm not going to miss football. Going on to the next question. Do you think, and I'm going to answer this one as well, unless you guys think I'm totally wrong, then I'll let you guys chime in over me. Do you think Kim Jong-un will attempt, gosh, how southern did I just say that? Do you think Kim Jong-un will attempt unification with South Korea, or are they too caught up in the cult of personality? Well, apparently Kim Jong-un's not running North Korea anymore, so I don't think he's going to attempt anything except maybe to not die. That's my take on the issue. Moving on to the next question. I didn't catch who this was from. Scrolling up. This is from Empyrean Cipher, I believe, right? G.W. Bush recently indicated that Brother Jeb might be running in 2016. If so, what impact, if any, do you think it will have on the Democrats' electoral strategy? Haven, start us off.
I'm a Floridian. I grew up under the governorship of Jeb Bush. I personally would have a difficult time picking between Jeb Bush or Hillary Clinton if he did run, and that's because those bastards aren't different in anything really. So as far as Democratic electoral strategy, I don't think it really changes anything, because in order for Jeb Bush to even get elected into the Republican ticket, he would have to go way far to the right, way more right that to me it would be almost unnatural for him, as he's, to me, the smarter Bush in my life. So it's like, once he does that, it's going to completely ostracize him from the nation as a whole. The kind of rhetoric that he needs to do, the kind of vitriol that he needs to spit, it's going to turn a lot of people off. So I don't think it would really affect the electoral process for the Democrats.
Yeah, this is a little bigger than what the scope of the question was. I think Haven really summed up the question really well. I don't know that I could add anything better. But more so than how this would affect, the Democratic Party, because again, Hillary is the crown holder here. There's just no, and I use that term on purpose, because what I'm getting at here is, one of the things that made America happen was the idea of getting away from a monarchy that was passed down by family name. And so think about that. If we have two Clintons and two Bushes in as many decades, with a brief break, with somebody else in between, like that just speaks to how much we've lost our democracy. And again, not that people can't necessarily be, no good civil servants just because somebody in their family was. Quite frankly, I think Teddy Roosevelt, probably the best Republican president of all time behind Lincoln, and FDR is one of the better Democratic presidents of all time. But that's kind of what's going on there, right? They were distant cousins spread out over several decades, and they came from different ends of the spectrum. What we're talking about is having two brothers and a husband and wife representing the same respective parties almost back to back to back to back to back. That's a straight up monarchy, and the fact that it just switches the D or the R by their name, the policy is really no different. As Wes Clark Jr. rightly points out on the TYT live show, basically anytime he's on, and neither party has had a different economic policy since 1981. And since September 11th, have you seen a different foreign policy from either party? I mean, well, those are the two most pressing issues in the world right now, and it doesn't matter who we elect. Anyway, I'm depressed now, so we're going to move on to the next question here. Jules, if you're with us, I'll let you take this one. What lessons? This is from Empyrean Cipher. What lessons from simple persistence to bringing umbrellas can activists in North America, i.e. Ferguson, learn from the protesters in Hong Kong?
I think we need to learn how to organize ourselves. There are so many things that we could really get going if we were a bit more organized, and people would just get off their fucking asses and go out in the street and be part of the community. Being part of the community, I think, is a start to getting organized. So I guess that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, these are kids who I heard an interview the other day. Like, these were kids who, obviously in China, and I know Hong Kong is different than mainland China. That's part of the issue here. But like, by skipping class, a lot of these kids were throwing away their education, like their educational future. Like, they can basically be knocked out of school for doing this, and of course, in that system, that can ruin the rest of your life. And these kids got up and they said, "Yeah, this is worth it. This is worth running that risk." So like, that's people who are not just moved and incensed, but like willing to make that sacrifice. And it's so, as a Christian, I love it because it's so like self-sacrificial. Again, you can go back, look at our previous segments on Ferguson. Like, my heart is with people who are at a position of disadvantage, and even though I may not agree with it, I'm going to be slow to condemn someone for maybe lashing out with a bad decision like we've seen happen in Ferguson. But like, that's not what these cats are doing, man. These cats are being as peaceful as they can. They're putting up, umbrellas or whatever. They've got this symbolic gesture going on. They're completely in the right. They're getting tear gas. They're having everything done to them. And I mean, and on top of that, even the risk that they face there, they face a much greater risk. Literally their entire life can be affected by what they're doing right now. And I think that's the kind of a civil engagement that we need. I think that's what MLK wanted. Like, everybody was, back during in Jim Crow South, maybe you couldn't go to the bathroom with white folks, but as long as you didn't speak up or whatever, your life wasn't ruined any more than the system kind of had. MLK stood up and he said, "Hey, like, you're going to get ostracized in the community. You're going to become a public enemy of the people who are oppressing you. Not only do you need to take that risk, but you need to be completely nonviolent and peaceful about it." And like, man, that's what makes change, and that's what being above reproach is all about. And again, it's easy for me to say that because I'm in a position of advantage, right? Like, I'm a white dude in America, and I get that.
But you're not rich, so you're screwed at least on that.
I'm gonna keep it real. I make pretty good money.
I was trying to give you.
So,
one thing I would say is that the thing that we've lost as Americans that is being exemplified in Hong Kong is it's obvious that they feel a duty to each other. They feel a duty to their community. They feel like it's a no-brainer to sacrifice your time and to protest for the whole. And what we've done here is that we've made it a pejorative to do anything related to the community. We've kind of focused our society and our culture to being individualistic and pull yourself up by your bootstrap type thing, which really wasn't how we moved forward into anything. So it's like we need to gain that back. You know, being a community organizer is not necessarily a dirty thing. It's, I mean, that's one of the things that I think a lesson that hasn't been learned in Ferguson. You know, there's a reason why a lot of those police officers were all white, and it's because a lot of the community doesn't want to be in that department. You know, one of the things that could be changed, not only getting rid of their sheriff, but also actively becoming a part of the system that you want to change. And that's something that we don't like to do. We're a little bit, I won't say self-absorbed, but we're kind of turned off of that notion of, like, I have a duty to you. Like, I may not have kids, but it's my duty to ensure that your neighborhood is nice for yours, because your kids are going to grow up and somehow dictate my future. Like, we all are duty bound to each other, and that's something that we don't learn or care about anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. Moving on to our next question here, and I'll go ahead and let Jules take this one. This is from Empyrean Cipher. Are reproductive technologies doing more harm than good by enabling people to spawn litters of children onto an already overpopulated planet with so many unwanted while so many unwanted kids are waiting to be adopted? That's what we call a leading question, but I'll go ahead and let you take it, Jules.
Yes, it is a very leading question. Yeah, there are some really great advantages to the reproductive technologies that we're coming out with, and I want to say more so from a viewpoint of being able to help control some of the diseases that we have, genetic diseases or genetic disorders that are going on. It definitely helps to be able to get a better control on these types of things. Speaking as someone who has several not really nice genetic disorders that I'm having to deal with, if I would have, you know, I can't say if I would have known that my children had this before they were born, I'd say no, that I wouldn't have wanted them, but I know that's not necessarily where you're going with the question, but it would have been nice to know early, so that I knew how to handle things. As far as the overpopulation goes, yeah, I think people are getting way too caught up in the me generation. Oh, I have to have a child that's just like me. You know, I want blonde hair, blue eyes, I want this, I want that. I don't think kids should be manufactured, so to speak, especially since there are so many kids out there wanting and needing to be adopted. Big problem is regulations for getting adoptions put through are so fucking hard to get past. It's very, very difficult to try to adopt a child, especially if you don't have any money, or not the amount of money to go through all of the legal process. You may have the money to be able to take care of the child, but you may not be able to pay for the legal process, and so it makes it difficult.
Yeah, totally. We're in the process of being foster certified right now. So definitely, and for us, that's a matter of being Christian and pro-life. Like, if we're going to be pro-life, then we figure part of being pro-life means if you've got the means to foster or adopt, you got to do it. But yeah, and to bring it back to the question, it's my understanding, I'm kind of shooting off the cuff here, so if I'm wrong, feel free to fact check me. But I think the technology is really benefiting from, or the countries, the parts of the world, I should say, benefiting from reproductive technology are places where the birth rate is steadily declining. It's the developing world where you've got an incredibly high birth rate and overpopulation is a risk. It's the developed world that has access to these technologies, and I think maybe that's not just a correlation. I think there's some causation there, because people wait until they're 40 or whatever now. You're not trying to just get kids as soon as you can and get as many of them as you can, because infant mortality rates are down. You can wait longer now. You used to, there was a time cutoff that was a lot sooner than it is now, and you had to have as many kids as you could, as quick as you could. Now we've got a little more control over that.
I think that we're not really being honest with the fact that our population is aging. So even with this access, we are not making more babies. Where the population of the planet is growing exponentially is in underdeveloped nations, and it's for various reasons. So me personally, I'm not that worried about overpopulation in the United States. I mean, we have plenty of room because we're making a shit ton of corn for our cows, so we don't really care about wasting space. So it's like, and we're not really making, we are not having children as early as we used to. A lot of people are deciding to not have children at all. But I am a proponent for adoption because there are a lot of kids that are stuck, in a system, and they need loving homes. I commend you, Jordan, for trying to become a foster family. Hopefully, you don't get a black kid because that guy's gonna get shot in the face.
Oh my goodness! You say that, Haven. My neurologist and I, we usually have these 2-hour-long chats when I go in. They always schedule me the last patient of the day, and it is chilling the way when we talk about we were talking about the whole situation with Mike Brown and everything, and he was talking about how scared he is for his son, who is 7 years old and growing up in this world, and what's going to happen to him. And it's just it's terrifying, that and you said that, and it made me think of this. But yeah, I'm an idealist, so I think that everyone should have a home. I would love to be able to foster, but because of my situation, I'm on disability, and I don't really make the money to be able to house another child, and I'd never be able to be past certified because of my physical limitations, which really is annoying because I think I could really do a good job with especially older kids. Anyway.
Well, and in all honesty, too, like, all praise needs to go towards, mostly like my wife, who stayed on me about pointing out, like, this is kind of the Christian thing to do. This is not necessarily something that I'm doing out of, because I'm such a great person. Like, I've had several people, notably my wife and one of my son's godfather, who's adopted 2 kids, who've kind of made it their mission to point out, like, what a great cause this is. So this is, us fostering is, like, no indication of me being a good dude or anything like that. It's, an indication of how the quality of people in my life are, and how much they implore me to do the right thing and do that. So moving on then to the next question here. How come Republicans, and I'm sorry, this, I didn't get who this was from, but it's for all of us. How come Republicans scream about not listening to judges when decisions don't go their way? Is it... Hold on, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh, I think...
Okay, how come Republicans who scream about not listening to judges, but then the decision goes their way and they're sore and bitter losers? I think it's kind of what they're getting at. Like, basically, why is it there's such a double standard there? Like, I'll let you go ahead and start off.
Because that's Republican MO. What I want is what works, and what you want is tyranny. Period. That's kind of like their thing. I mean, when it's about making sure that a boss can dictate whether or not a woman has birth control, they're all about believing in the sanctity of the Supreme Court. But let the Supreme Court want that same woman to have equal pay and go for it, or be able to marry her wife, then it's like, oh well, they're activist judges. How could they do such a thing? Just destroying the perfect union that is the SCOTUS and your dissensions. Like, they're hypocrites. Like, if anybody is under the impression that a politician is not a hypocrite, then I really want your drugs of happiness, because I want to be delusional just as much as you are for at least 15.
Yeah. I think human beings in general are, hypocrisy is something we all deal with. This is kind of a a question that hits close to home because, again, the previously mentioned and previously antagonized state senator here in Arkansas, Jason Rayford, has kind of built a career out of that, like of standing up for, what the population wants and getting upset whenever judges dare intercede on the behalf of minorities against a popular vote or sentiment, and then he'll turn around and try to prevent like a ballot measure that would put something in the hands of those same citizens, and to keep the majority rule in place on something like dry counties versus wet counties if it's something he doesn't want to happen. Like it's a total just like basically whatever philosophy of government can achieve the goal that they want at that particular moment, that's the right one. And let's keep it real. President Obama is doing this right now, like appealing to a law he said was unconstitutional to drum up the war against ISIS. Like that's, it's so call it fair game. I get that, at least from our perspective. It seems like Republicans do this a lot, and to the question, especially around like the rulings of judges and whatnot. But this is part of being human, and even more common than it is being human, it's part of being a politician. So call it fair game, I guess. Is that? Do we have any more questions? Am I missing anything?
I didn't see any others. My input for this is
I'm sorry. Yeah,
the same.
Sorry about
that. That's okay. I think that there's so much hypocrisy in the way our politicians do everything, and it's not just Republicans, it's also Democrats, it's everyone. They look at things and they say, okay, we want this to happen, and they'll do everything they can to try to make it push through, and then they'll get it through and they won't be happy with it. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how it's done. It's like with trying to close down these abortion clinics with trap laws and stuff. If the Supreme Court ruled that, yeah, all of that was legal and everything, Republicans would still find something to bitch about, so it just is hypocrisy.
Sure, for sure. All right, we've had another question come in. This one's directed at me from Tom, who's really just been on fire tonight with some great questions. Jordan, as a Christian, do you find it hard to be a liberal or easier? This is a question I get a lot, and I understand why. Like, I'm not naive. Like, I get that Christianity is not really associated with the left these days. So I guess the answer there is kind of complicated. One is that, like, I do identify as a liberal, but I feel like that's just kind of a happenstance thing. Like I don't tend to approach my opinions I try my best to not come at it like initially from the liberal perspective, and then try to find ways to defend that. Like I'll stay away from bias whenever it comes to a new story that I haven't heard anything about. Like I try to find something on like NPR or something like that first to try to get like the story presented and form my own opinion, and then I'll go and seek out something. I'm going to be completely honest. I just try to avoid some news outlets. I don't want to name them because I think I got in trouble last time I did, because apparently we've got a partnership with some of them on the network. But there are some left-leaning news outlets out there that like I can't stand, man. Like they're just freaking dishonest. But that said, like I feel I try my best like to form an opinion, and it just so happens that what is quote-unquote identified, at least in 2014, as the liberal opinion is the one I come down on more often than not. That said, I'm fairly pro, I don't want to say I'm pro-gun, but I'm pro-Second Amendment, if that makes sense. I guess I can clarify on that, maybe if somebody wants to ask that question. But I'm pro-life, very, very strongly pro-life. I'm an evangelical Christian. Like I've definitely, and that's why I go with the regressive progressive handle, because I don't try to let my whatever side I identify with be the thing that really drives the way I approach an issue. But then back to, so that's the big crazy complicated answer that you probably didn't want. other than that, but one of the things that drives that process and how I do disseminate, my worldview, whatever you want to call it, the lens I process information through, like my faith is number one. And so in this particular day and age, like to me, the quote unquote leftist side is the side that's more concerned with taking care of the poor, with feeding the hungry and healing the sick. And those are some of the things that Christ seemed to think was essential. Now, as for like my keeping government out of politics and stuff like that, again, that's a completely Christian stance for me. Like I think in America that's what you have to do because it's in the Constitution. But like Christianity, going like throughout history, the 2,000 years that Christianity's been around, the problems that people have with it are almost always associated with whenever it gets involved in the state. Like whenever people point out evil things Christianity has done and why they hate Christianity so much, no one ever talks about the 1st through 3rd century church. They start at Constantine and work forward. And whenever Christianity is something that's being persecuted by the state, much less not the official religion, but it's almost an enemy of the state, nobody has a problem with Christianity at that time historically. And I think that's the example not only that we see in history, that's the example that we see from Christ, who refused political power multiple times. He said, no, one day I'll be king, but it's going to be on my terms. It's I'm not here to take over your government. So there's that. I'm sorry, that's a really, really long answer. I didn't mean to hijack the show there with that. Nick, thanks so much for joining us, man. It's good to see you.
You're welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And Jordan, thank you again. Sorry, everybody. I've been a little busy as of late with, that whole being employed thing kind of ending at about 9 every day, every night. So I'm never really able to make the show. So thought I'd just rush in and troll all the comments here for a bit. So what was the question you asked, Jordan?
The question I was asked was, Jordan, as a Christian, do you find it hard to be liberal or easier? It's harder to fit in sometimes. I'll say that. Like I catch it from both sides. A lot of my right-wing Christian friends, get mad at my politics, and a lot of my left-wing political friends get mad at my religion. And I'll tell you one thing that I do find it very difficult, and that's to watch the Young Turks talk about religion. Because, good Lord, man, Reza Aslan, who is not a Christian, right? He's a Muslim, but he nailed it, man. Like, when he talked about Bill Maher, and it's a tendency in the left in general, like, their views of religion are so simplistic and, like, just not sophisticated at all. And I'm going to be honest, the best word to use them to describe them is fundamentalist. Like, it is really, really difficult for me to make it all the way through a TYT religious story on the main channel. I gotta be completely honest.
I can see that. I can understand that. I mean, I am an atheist, so I can't really speak to the difficulty in getting through that. But there are definitely the big thing I find. I can't attest to you and what it's like being a religious person on the left, but I can say that I've also found some of the things Mara and others have said very cringeworthy. It's more the lack of nuance, and not just necessarily on their part, but I find whoever, like for example Ben Affleck on the other side at that time, kind of shouted down a lot of opportunity to introduce more nuance to the discussion as well. That's not to say Mar in general is excusable for his usual lack of nuanced opinions about those things, but there's definitely both parties don't seem to always be willing to allow for nuance, and it's very unfortunate because as far as I'm concerned, that's how the world operates, in nuanced worlds, in grays, shades of gray, always. And when you disallow that, you are not creating a reality or discussing reality. You are discussing idealized or worst-case scenario worlds in all situations. And so I think it's immensely detrimental to everybody when nuance is either shouted down or ignored or disregarded entirely. So I can totally understand where you're coming from, at least on that angle, Jordan. But that's about it.
I mean, as far as people like Jordan, I welcome that kind of mindset. I mean, I'm also an atheist, but I appreciate that because it reins in on certain things. And sometimes there are certain devoutly Christian liberals that I think serve the liberal title way better than any non-believing liberal. They're they're a little bit more understanding, and I personally don't have a problem if you can marry your faith with any kind of liberal principles, which to me, it's been a while since I've been to church, but a lot of the things that Jesus was pumping are very liberal ideas in the first place. So to not be able to marry that, I would think would be a very, very difficult thing. But having people like Jordan are what we don't have in either party. Like, we don't have a lot of them. A lot of people look at talking about the moderates of Muslim, but we're killing moderates, period. A lot of people want to point out that there's no safety for the people like Malala in Pakistan or some shit, but there's no safety for people like Jordan in this country when it comes to voicing their opinion. Everybody wants to be so hardcore to the right or so hardcore to the left, or pretend to be hardcore to the left. I don't think there's a lot of hardcore lefties, but they're that rational, being able to sit down, talk to somebody, and have a discourse without getting nasty or vitriolic is something that's very difficult. And I applaud you, Jordan.
Oh, I appreciate that. I was going to say something.
Jordan, I do want to say I do 100% agree with you about cringing during the TYT stories and the whole Mar thing. Just, oh my God. As the director of religious education for our local UU, so I have a lot of experience in a variety of different faith systems. Not just the run-of-the-mill ones, but even some, of the more tribal, quote-unquote, belief systems that are out there. And, oh my God, they run religion through a grinder that spits out something that is not even close to being what it should be. I admire Raza Aslan for coming out and being an outspoken person for this. The thing that pisses me off about this whole situation is it's not so much Muslims are bad or Islamic people who practice Islam are bad. Americans hear this, and what they see is those brown people over there are bad because all those brown people over there must be Muslim or whatnot, and that's not the fucking case. So we are such a racist society here in America as it is. So people like Mar pushing this fact that Muslims are bad, people who practice Islam, they're bad. What he's saying, or what a lot of Americans are hearing is, oh, those brown people over there are bad. So anyone that's brown, you can hate more now.
I'd like to touch on that a little bit too, because that's Julie raised a very interesting and accurate point about that too. That it's a common trope, especially in literature as well, that there's always the perception of the other, and it's a very easy scapegoat in storytelling. It's a very easy scapegoat in modern life, and that's one of the reasons why it's a very easy scapegoat in storytelling. The perception of the other, that which is different, that looks different, that behaves different, that seems different, is what is often gravitated to as a threat to the normalcy of the story or the society or the community. And it's I would argue it's probably a very a subconscious, perhaps even a natural trait among human beings in some sense of the word, to characterize the other as something to be a little bit suspicious of, maybe not hostile to, but that if there was ever a threat, that would be the first assumption it would come from. And that's really what I see a lot of this anti-Muslim rhetoric as. As Julie's pointed out, it's because they look different than us and stuff too. However, what underlies that, I think, is the same sort of principle that does underlie a lot of literature, and it's what happens when the other doesn't physically look different at first. For example, and I think this is why some people are so terrified of Islam and want to say it's bad, is they are horrified, utterly horrified at the idea of possibly coming across a white Muslim. That, I think, is one of the overwhelming fears, because it ties into that sense of the other, but not the kind you can see. It's it's kind that's much more difficult to tell because they don't look physically different. Their skin tone isn't different. They're not Middle Eastern. They're perhaps a British or a descent or French descent, and they converted in their own lifetime. And I think it's that possible underlying principle that is just multiplies that fear by leaps and bounds.
I got you. Well, hey guys, we are coming up on the 2-hour mark here, and I've got family at home, and I need to go see them. So we're going to have to go ahead and wrap up the show, which stinks because there's some really, really good questions I wanted to get to. Tom's got a good one. Empyrean Cypher's got one. I get where he's coming from. Man, it would have been a fun conversation. Maybe we can do that another time. Hang on to that there, Cypher. Hey guys, thanks so much for joining with us. Like I say, we had to put this together real last minute. Again, if this is your first time viewing, I'm sorry it's not so polished. Jeff will still be able to edit and post and get the clips to kind of back to the standard quality that you've come to expect from us and that we owe you. And as usual, guys, be sure and check out the Patreon campaign. Oh man, I don't have that link here, but search for TYT Nation in Patreon. Help Jeff out. The more quote unquote members we get in our Patreon campaign, the better this show gets. If you'd like to be on the show, you can contact Jeff Waldorf. It's at Jeff's Politics on Twitter. Be sure and follow everybody on Twitter. I'm Jordan French, the Regressive Progressive. My Twitter handle is at Sean is Wrong. Nick, you want to sound off? Give us your Twitter handle.
Of course, my name's Nick. My Twitter handle's at FewerFreyute. Have fun spelling that, but I'm sure you can find me through Jeff or Jordan's Twitter handle as well. I'm on there, I think, unless Jordan's removed me for some certain unnamed reasons that I won't go into right now.
I'm not aware that I have. And then I think Haven had to go ahead and step out. She's got family to hang out with, too. Follow her at Twitter. That's at HavenGOTS. And then, Jules, are you on Twitter?
Yes, I am. And as a matter of fact, I was just looking up to see what it was, to be honest with you. It's, let's see here, at Jules K. Frazier, all one word.
Okay, well, there you go. That's everybody that's here tonight. That's our Twitter handles. Thanks so much for joining us. Like I say, help Jeff out, guys. Make a one-time donation if you can't sign up, and do it every month. And if you want to get on the show and be a part of the show, just let Jeff know. Again, that's at Jeff's Politics on Twitter. Thank you guys so much for joining us. That goes out to my panelists and to my audience. We really, really appreciate you. Again, I'm from the TYT Community show on the TYT Nation YouTube channel. I'm Jordan French. Good night and God bless, guys.
Good night.
Night all.